children need to hear the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix. Too scared to sing the anthem from a braver day, a song our children still need to hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.
And there you go. And yes, let's go, as Carla says. But thanks again for the collaboration between Faith, Culture, Politics in Australia, which is my platforms, streaming to X, Rumble, YouTube and Facebook. And also thank you to Michael Gray-Griffith for the platform on Cafe Locked-Out. So good on you, everybody, and welcome to whoever might be joining us there. A few people starting to come through, so we're starting to crack into it. So it's good to see. I was a bit worried there while I was playing the intro. Sometimes we get the comments coming in a bit earlier, Bruce, and they're sitting there before we even go live. Hit the live button, and I thought, oh, I'm hoping all the technical stuff's working all right. But we're seeing some people come in there. So regulars, Carla there, obviously. Then we had Susie, welcome, Susie. Phillips there too. Jan's, oh yep, Jan. What do we got? Yep. Lily's there. You haven't seen your comment for a little while. 1984 punk. Yay. Yep. Good to see. Well, yep, they're streaming in, Bruce. Streaming in. Good to see, brother. Good to see.
Yep, it's all good, isn't it? And I don't look pixelated. I watch the show. Well, I watch it every week, and one thing I must say is I'm amazed at how many times I misspeak. Where you either use the wrong word or actually literally say the opposite of what you're intended to. And you might remember back in the Hillary Clinton era, and every time she lied, she said, "Oh, I misspoke." Yeah, misspeaking is a thing. So yeah, sometimes I do actually, the words that come out are the opposite of what I intended, but hopefully the context makes that clear. But remember last week we had that poor video from my end. The audio was fine, but yeah, the video was pretty dodge. Looks all right to me. How are you seeing me this week?
Yeah, no, definitely looking a lot better. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just not sure what it was. Yep. Oh wait, yeah. Bruce is wearing the Geelong colours. You're a Geelong supporter, Bruce?
Nah, don't do any of that contrived bread and circuses stuff. Although apparently the Commonwealth Games are about to start. That was in the news tonight. Again, no, I used to be a good little citizen and, follow the football teams and all that. And I just worked out it's all contrived, and the real world is far more interesting and far more important than bread and circuses.
Yeah, I don't know if it was you that told me or whether I picked it up somewhere else, and I've got to look into it myself. But the word to muse, musing something is to think about something, to theorize, to theological. So they say when they put an A in front of something, it means the opposite. So amusement. So all this stuff is amusement. You call it bread and circuses. It's like amusement is all the opposite. And isn't that exactly what our state government, Peter Malinauskas, throws lots of amusement options to the South Australian public. So it's the opposite of asking people to think for themselves. So they zone out and they focus on the amusement instead. But anyway, not having to go at anybody that loves their football and all these other sorts of things. But I just thought that was a bit of trivia there. So there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not sort of that full into it. So good to see everybody, all those streaming, all that stuff streaming through now. Now, Bruce, let's do this. What do you reckon?
Let's do it.
Righto. So I'm got my own little PowerPoint presentation this week, and apologise to all the. Well, no, I'm not going to apologise. So all the agnostics or atheists that might be watching, this may not interest you at all, but people that might be inclined, Christians thinking about, the history of the church and so forth. You and I have talked a little about since I've you've got hold of a Bible and you're doing a little bit of investigation yourself in regards to the Christian faith and so forth, as you said you would, because you've been critical of others. I've been on a Christian journey for quite a number of years and been in and out of different denominations and researching and so forth. But I'm also now an inquirer into a different one, Bruce. So I wanted to share a little bit about that, just as an inquirer. I'm not saying that I'm actually going to be baptized into this particular faith or whatever, but I thought I'd share it just based on my own inquiries and see what you think. You might be able to comment on the end of it. And then I've just got one other little thing I wanted to share from a good South Australian friend who's doing some amazing work, and that'll be me, and then I'll hand over to you. So what do you reckon? Shall we get a kick on?
Let's do this thing.
Let's do this. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. So this is Discovering Eastern Orthodoxy, and an explainer for inquirers. So I am an inquirer myself, and just thought I'd share a little bit about what I'm learning along the way. So what is Eastern Orthodoxy? So it's the original Christian church of the East, tracing its roots directly to the apostles, also called the Orthodox Catholic Church, meaning right believing. So right believing or original is Orthodox, and Catholic actually means universal for those that didn't know. So it's actually a universal church. Approximately 260 to 300 million members worldwide, and in Australia around 500,000 Orthodox Christians, fastest growing Christian group in recent census data. The heart of Orthodox life, the divine liturgy. So people go, there's the sort of, especially people that are just, they go to maybe their Baptist service or other kind of Protestant kind of services, or lots of singing and dancing. This is very much in regards to liturgy. So the central act of worship is like the Mass, but with distinct emphasis, divided into three main parts. The liturgy of preparation, so this is preparing the bread and the wine for consecration, for the blessing by the priest. Then the liturgy of the catechumens, so that it goes through scripture and prayers and gospel, and a lot of this is done through chanting and not through actual speaking the word. So it's singing, chanting it. And the liturgy of the faithful, which is the Eucharist, which is the climax, which is obviously the receiving of the sanctified bread and wine by the priest for the parishioners who are people of the Orthodox faith. Key hymns that people might experience if they did end up wanting to check out a traditional Orthodox service is a Trisagion, which is Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, have mercy on us. And then the cherubim hymn, let us who mystically represent the cherubim. It is truly meet. So this is to the Theotokos. Now, the Theotokos is the Holy Virgin Mary, Bruce, which is the mother of God, or mother of Jesus Christ. So she's very much revered in the Catholic and the Orthodox faith. And we have seen the true light, which is after the communion. So it's not a performance as such, but there's a belief from Orthodox that it's heaven and earth combining for that service, and many converts say the beauty and the reverence drew them in immediately. Now, Bruce, I've been going for about 8 weeks, and I have to attest to that. First time I went there and listened to the liturgy, it was actually really compelling to go. So I actually enjoy going back every week. Direct connection to the apostles. So this is the apostolic fathers. These are the disciples of Jesus's disciples, so the generation right after the apostles. So St. Clement of Rome is the disciple associate of Peter and Paul, who wrote on church order and unity. St. Ignatius of Antioch, he was a disciple of John, emphasized bishops, Eucharist and martyrdom. St. Polycarp of Smyrna was a disciple of John. His martyrdom account is one of the earliest. And St. Papias collected oral traditions about Jesus and the Gospels. Now, that's only a really small example of how many there are. Their writings show the faith was already Catholic, which means universal, and structured with bishops, sacrament, and tradition alongside Scripture. The first 1,000 years, there was one church. And if people look at Acts, you'll see church mentioned so many times. From the apostles until 1054, there was one church that shared the same Nicene Creed with the original version of the faith, 7 ecumenical councils, which is where I'll explain that in a minute, the 7 sacraments, the veneration of Mary, which is Jesus' mother, saints and the icons, apostolic succession, and monastic life. The differences existed, cultural, liturgical, and some theological tensions, but the faith was recognisably the same. After the time of the apostles and the apostolic fathers, false teachings started spreading. To protect the faith that had been handed down, the bishops of the whole church came together in what was called ecumenical councils. These weren't top-down decisions made by one leader. Bishops from everywhere gathered, discussed, prayed, and sought the mind of the church. A decision only became part of the faith when the whole church accepted it. Both the East and the West accepted these first 7 councils. When we talk about the West, the Church of the West, the Roman Catholic Church, and then you have the East as well. So go into that a little bit further. The ecumenical councils, how the early church protected the faith. So why the councils were needed? There were heresies that were spreading and distorted core Christian beliefs about Jesus and the Trinity. Example, Arianism and Nestorianism. The church needed to clearly define what had been taught by the apostles. Councils brought bishops together from across the Christian world to speak with one voice. So these were councils. How the councils worked. Called together by the Roman emperor in the early centuries to help maintain peace and unity in the empire. Bishops from the East and the West gathered, prayed, debated, and voted. Decisions were guided by Scripture, the Apostolic Fathers, and the Holy Spirit. A teaching only became binding when it was received and accepted by the whole church, not just by one bishop or region. This is called conciliatory. The church decides together through its bishops. Some of the results, the first 7 ecumenical councils from 325 to 787 AD provided the Nicene Creed, which is a statement of faith, clear teaching on who Jesus is, fully God and fully man, the proper use of icons in worship. The Great Schism of 1054, the sad division. The long simmering issues boiled over, the Filioque clause added to the creed in the West unilaterally, growing claims of papal supremacy versus Eastern conciliar model, cultural and political divides. 1054, mutual excommunications between Rome and Constantinople, later lifted in 1965, but unfortunately the damage was already done. This wasn't just a fight over power, it was a tragic result of centuries of drifting apart. So a little bit more about the Filioque clause. The original creed of 381 AD agreed by the whole church, I believe in the Holy Spirit, who proceeds from the Father. What the West added, so the Roman Church, who proceeds from the Father and the Son, so Latin Filioque and the Son. The addition was made unilaterally in the West, starting in Spain in the 6th century without a ecumenical council. The East saw it as changing the faith of the apostles and the early church fathers. Theologically, many of the East believed it weakened the unique role of the Father as the sole source of the Trinity. It was one of the key issues that boiled over in 1054. The wound that never healed, the sack of Constantinople, 1204. During the Fourth Crusade, Western Latin Crusaders attacked and brutally sacked Constantinople, a Christian city. Churches were looted, including the Hagia Sophia. Civilians were massacred and raped. Relics were stolen and taken to the West. A Latin emperor and patriarch were installed. Many historians, including Catholic, Orthodox and secular, agree that the West went far too far. It was a profound betrayal that made reunion nearly impossible. The Byzantine Empire never recovered and fell to the Ottomans in 1453. Why do so many people choose Orthodoxy today? Studies and thousands of convert testimonies, including in Australia and the US, show consistent reasons. Historical and apostolic continuity. This is the church the apostles founded and the fathers preserved. The beauty and reverence of the divine liturgy. Many come from casual or entertainment style types of worship. The theosis, the call to become like God through grace and cooperation, not just saved once. Full sacramental and ascetic life, confession, fasting, prayer rules, icons, rejection of later Western developments, so the Filioque and the papal infallibility and scholastic legalism, a sense of depth and stability in a changing world, personal encounter. Many describe feeling at home or experiencing God's presence in the divine liturgy. And recent trends, significant growth in converts, especially young men in the US and Australia. In Australia, studies, 59% came from Protestant backgrounds and 37% from Catholic. And Orthodoxy in Australia today, there's around about 500,000 Orthodox Christians. Multiple jurisdictions include the Greek, the Antiochian, the Russian, which is the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, Serbian, Romanians, etc. And if you go to any of those, the liturgies are pretty much the same. They're in communion with one another. There are a growing number of inquirers and catechumens, especially among younger adults. And if people are curious, they can just visit a divine liturgy and just stand there and observe and check it out, see what they think. They don't have to, obviously, don't have to do anything, but I do encourage it as an experience, if nothing else. And if they want to read more, they read more about the Apostolic Fathers. There's lots of literature online about the Orthodox faith and so forth. It's not just a denomination, it's a living continuation of the faith once delivered to the saints by the early apostles, Bruce. So there you go. There's a little bit of a PowerPoint about my little inquiring about the Orthodox Church. And as I said, it may mean nothing to our agnostic or atheist viewers. So I appreciate you staying around for that bit so you can listen to Bruce, a little bit of a presentation. And for those Christians that might have been interested, but that's been my little bit of a journey there, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for that. And obviously, we're all aware that the Orthodox Church of some sort exists because we see the Greeks diving for the cross, just thrown in the water and so forth. And we've heard the term Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. So the Orthodox bit, what I'm taking from what you've said is it follows tradition much more closely. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they claim is it the original church because obviously the Catholic Church split away in 1054, so they believe that they still do the same as per the 7 ecumenical councils, and the tradition's the same. Yep.
Yeah, and I just had a thought, probably completely unrelated, reading to this, because you're right, I am still ploughing through the Bible, and the early books are very tough. There's a huge amount of historical and genealogical records, so-and-so had 3 sons and their wives were, et cetera, but I guess just sort of sprung on me is that certainly all the early stuff in the Christian Bible is all centered in Egypt, Israel, and that part of the Middle East. Clearly the Orthodox has spread well west, well east. But here's the question. Why is so much of the early Bible centered in Israel, centered in Egypt? What about all the other people on the earth? What about the Native American Indians? What about the Aborigines in Australia? Were they left behind? Were they left out? Were they only allowed to join in later? What became of them? Why was this not a worldwide document? Why is it so strongly centered in the Middle East?
Hey, it's a really good question, because I guess that was the period of time in the early Bible centered around I guess Israel and just not just physical Israel itself, but Israel as a nation that come out of Israel. And obviously there was a name change and that went through it. But if you have a look at the New Testament, obviously, and Jesus is meant to be, and you're not that far, obviously, you've got a lot to go through the early Bible, but Jesus is meant to be the fulfillment. And the Old Testament the scriptures in the Old Testament that lead towards the fulfillment of the Messiah, which obviously Christians follow is Jesus, right? So he's the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And so people, and then obviously if you read then later on, once you get to the New Testament, you'll see that even in the Acts of the Apostles and the writings of the Romans and so forth, they talk about and one of the ways I talk about it is that you got Gentiles, and then you got the Jews, and there used to be about circumcision. The Jews used to be circumcised so they know that they are the people of God. But then it talks about, in the New Testament, talks about the internal circumcision, so changing your body. So a lot of the Gentiles that weren't actually Jewish actually acted in a way that was pleasing to God just by their nature and adopting that. And so what ended up happening is that you become circumcised internally through your heart and your actions and so forth. So you ended up becoming part of the seed, and it's explained in regards to a vine, right? So the bad fruit of the vine, or the bad branches, were cut off because God, all through history, Israel turned away from God, right? They backslid and all that, and so the bad branches were cut off. But the Gentiles, which are people that weren't Jewish, weren't circumcised, were grafted into the vine. So the people that accepted Jesus and grafted into the vine, so they are now as one. So this is the difference between what Jewish tradition is and what Christian tradition is that we all have the hope of salvation, not just a select group of people. Is that everybody in the world has a hope of salvation by believing that Christ is their Lord and Savior, and they give their life to Jesus. So they all have that salvation. That was probably pretty crude explanation there, because I'm kind of rushing, because I know that this is not a full theological program of ours. We want to get into your stuff as well. So it was a bit of a crude explanation there, but once you get to that, it'll explain it a little bit more as you're digging through. But you've got so much more to go through first. But as you know, as a Christian, I get a bit of pushback from that, because obviously I've been challenged in the past about, in my writings and other things, why I don't class myself, like you say, Australia is Judeo-Christian, because I'm a Christian, and the New Testament, and being a Christian, it's a fulfillment of the Old Testament. So I see myself as a Christian because I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and nothing else. And I believe I have the beautiful chance of salvation through Him by being hopefully internally circumcised, not externally, and not belonging to just a select group of people in the world. So anyway, that's my explanation. People might, yeah, that's right. People might challenge me over that, which is fine. That's all good. But that's kind of where I'm at in my journey at the moment. So there we go.
Yep, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I've also changed my saying. I don't say Judeo-Christian anymore, because I think there's a major difference between the two of them, and I think current events in the Middle East are just one illustration of that. But again, we were trained, just as we were trained to use the term hunter-gatherer, when I think we were hunters, not gatherers. I think Australia's built on Christian values, not Judeo-Christian values, because they're clearly not the same. And I'm just starting to go through that. And one of the things that I'm never going to be able to accept is the covenant of circumcision, because as a medical practitioner and a libertarian, I regard that as an unconsenting mutilation of young children. And I will never accept that, even if the book says that gains you some benefits. That should be left until the boy is an adult and can decide for himself. And pro tip, almost none of them do. It's a bit like the old vax thing. Fill your kids up with vaxes while they're really young for things like hepatitis B that, they're at almost no risk of. Why do we do that? We'll get them young before they can say no. And I think circumcision is along the same lines. And I'm not being anti-Semitic. The Muslims also regard circumcision as a necessary religious thing, and I criticise both of them. I think that it's an abomination. We should not be doing this to unconsenting children. We should wait and let them make up their own minds.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, look, there's obviously circumcision was apparently a covenant between God and man, so I guess that was the tradition back then, but that was done away with even from the New Testament. Is that internal circumcision is to purify your heart and mind towards Jesus. And just as a side by side before I move on, Bruce, people might find it interesting that the term, and this is actually on Google, so it hasn't been censored, right? The term Judeo-Christian evolved in two main phases It initially appeared in the 1820s in Germany and the 1890s in English to describe Jewish converts to Christianity. So I'm not a convert from Judaism. And however, its modern cultural meaning emerged in the late 1930s and 1940s during the rise of European fascism. US religious liberals and interfaith groups popularized it to unite Christians and Jews against Nazism. So there you go. So it's not actually biblically, it's only been around for the last couple of 100 years, the term Judeo-Christian. So there you go. There's another little tidbit for you, and that's not from, my own mind. That is actually from the Googles, which we know highly censor certain information. So if people want to label me anti-Semitic, that's okay as well.
Good-o. It's time, I think.
It's time. All right, hang on. One more thing I wanted to share before we get onto your stuff. I had this sent through from Angela Rojas, who is a South Australian who's been doing a lot. She's a book classifier that managed to get some changes in regards to sexually explicit books in libraries and so forth and schools. And she's kicked off a new website, and it's called Believe in Action Australia. And there's also a petition link to that, so if people want to check that out. But Angela Rojas, great South Australian who's been trying to push back on the indoctrination of our children through inappropriate books and content. So this is also talks a lot about the puberty blockers issue and all sorts of things. So I only had this shared with me just recently before we come to air, and I thought I'd just let people know about it, and people can check it out. Believe in Action Australia, so there's people can get involved. Children cannot consent on this stuff. I'll just read this first little bit here. We are raising awareness about parents not having access to full consent of what our children are learning at school. Our children are learning about sexuality. Are they developmentally ready to discuss topics such as having a choice to be either a boy or a girl, being able to socially transition without parental awareness? During the most important developmental stages, whilst our children are physically changing, schools are teaching our children that they may be different, maybe a different sex. Puberty is awkward. If we introduce concepts that we can bypass this awkwardness, we are potentially bringing harm to the children. Puberty blockers and hormone therapy are irreversible and may cause lifelong issues, and there's lots of evidence about that. And she's provided a lot of stuff there. There's a petition there that people can check out. So I just thought I'd share that on behalf of Angela Rojas. So I've interviewed her on my podcast a couple of times as well. So great South Australian as well. So just thought I'd share it.
Good to hear. Oh, and I'm just looking over. One of my to-do list things this week was to shave the old head, and clearly I haven't done it yet.
No, I'm due for a haircut tomorrow.
This stays, by the way. This stays.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
And have you noticed my little label there?
Mm-hmm. Your little label. Oh yeah, Grandpa. Oh, yes. Congratulations. Yes, congratulations. Look at you go.
Hence the grey. Yeah, welcome my first grandson this week. So that's good. That's been a little bit nerve-wracking.
Yes, many blessings there, brother, because that is what a wonderful thing as a grandparent or even a parent to know that you're, without you doing the first bit, this one wouldn't be around either. So you're doing your bit as a granddad, your future generations. So, and I've got my second one due in about 4 weeks' time.
You might need to grey up a bit as well.
Yeah, I'm not ready for the Grecian yet, mate. I'm just starting to come there, though. The beard's growing back out again, so we'll see how we go. I don't know if I'll catch up with you. Well, hopefully we'll do the shows long enough where I might be able to catch up with you, brother. Yeah, all right, I mean, let's do this. I haven't actually, and sorry if I haven't been throwing comments up on the screen because I've been too busy gas bagging myself, and so I've probably skipped a lot of the amazing comments that are coming through. So there's a stack of them coming through, guys. So God bless you. Thank you for sending those through.
Yeah, and you can. I believe they go out live. I don't know. I sort of watch the show live, but.
Oh, they come. They depends on where people are at the show, right? So some people might join, and then they're actually lagging behind by a few minutes. So sometimes you're into a segment and someone's responding to an earlier segment that you've done. So sometimes I don't actually put the comment up. So I do need to explain that to people. I don't actually put that up because Bruce is already in another segment when you're commenting on a segment previously, and it kind of distracts a bit. So I do like to try and throw comments out there and what user commenting. But I think one of the things is that you all interact with each other as well there on Rumble and on X and other platforms. You kind of comment to each other. See a lot of banter there, so that's okay. But we throw up what we can. So I just thought I'd clear that up.
Goodo. So I'm going to start with I'm going to issue a gazump strike to Jace there. And if you manage to stay all the way through the show, it'll become evident why at the end. How about that?
There you go. Your pussycats are always trouble. Well, at least, if not you, I mean, you and the musket or the pussycat walking across the keypad.
The cats are so different to dogs. They have absolutely no shame. I've got two cats here, which I got as tiny little kittens. So they've been raised since they were pups, and I originally got them to get rid of the mice because I live on a property and I haven't seen a mouse for a long time. But once every week or two, there's a complete rabbit shredded in the bathroom. So much so I had to take up the carpet from the hallway, because it was just this disgusting mess of old guts. So I put hard flooring down there. So the cats now, the only bit of carpet they can access is the bath mat. So that's where they shred the rabbits now.
Nice. You've worked it out. You've worked it out, those cats. And a few congratulations coming in through the chat there as well. So yeah, it's good stuff there. Good on you guys.
Fantastic. And it is great. I'm absolutely tickled pink. So that's great. All right, let's get into 117. So let me expand that up so I can read it. So contents list. The Gulf War is back on with a vengeance, by the way, with bombing Iran for the last 7 or 8 nights, and starting to hit infrastructure, which has been a bit of a no-no up to now, because the Iranians have said, well, tit for tat. You blow up a bridge or a desal plant, that's what we'll be hitting around the Gulf. And that's a huge thing. It's not just the Strait of Hormuz closed. We're starting to look at the destruction of all the industries in the Strait, and they are legion. And here in the West, we really haven't noticed that it's restarted, although it never stopped. So before I started tonight, I watched the first half hour of the 4 o'clock news before I came in to fire up. And they mentioned the resumption of the Gulf War at about 25 minutes in. So the more important stories were something about football. The Commonwealth Games is starting. There was some education story from Victoria. There was a hit piece on Pauline about, she's going on a podcast with convicted criminal Tommy Robinson. And I won't speak much about that, but I think it's fascinating. Pauline Hanson of One Nation's come out and said things that ordinary, decent Australians think and would love to hear someone else saying. Now, our wise rulers haven't actually noticed that publicising what she's saying is not detrimental to her, because people agree with it. But all we're hearing is, oh, my God, she went on a podcast with Tommy Robinson and they walked down the street in Luton and he said, this isn't the British city that I grew up in. Correct. It's not. And some people don't like that. So, yeah. So attacking her as a racist or wanting to return to white Australia, and Pauline Hanson's been the same as us. She's criticising cultural differences, not skin differences. And she makes that clear. You won't hear that in the mainstream media. All you hear is that she's this 1950s bigot who wants to go back to a white Australia. There's plenty of people who thought 1950s Australia was not too bad. And it wasn't based on a white Australia policy. It was based on small government, decent people, hard work, none of the stupid economic decisions which are hamstringing us, no green energy, for example, et cetera, et cetera. They were, in many ways, the peak of Australia. So to say, oh, she just wants to go back to the 1950s, yeah, a lot of people want to go back to the 1950s. I wouldn't mind going back to the 1950s. As long as I can have a Monaro from the early 70s, I just want to teleport that back. But yeah. All right. So
Interesting.
Gulf War being ignored. We're getting stuck into Pauline Hanson instead. Not easy being green. This story from friend of the channel, Danny, um, and it's an update on a common green theme, which is we've got to change what we're doing. It's bad for the planet. In particular, we've got to eat bugs instead of meat because meat is destroying the planet. And Danny sent me a story which looked at the water inputs to producing beef, and the headline said, "Oh my God, it's 15 tons of water for a kilo of beef." But the details, which I'll go into, actually showed that no, it actually uses more water to produce pistachios or nuts or almost anything else than beef. When you look at, okay, where is the water? How do you get it? Most beef, the water falls from the sky. If they don't eat it, it's gone. It's not a resource. So that'd be interesting little discussion. Thanks for that. Bit of an economics lesson. We've got a combination of Laffer's curve and Riston's law in action because millionaires are apparently fleeing New York after their socialist mayor, Mamdani, introduced a wealth tax. So amazingly, people who've got money are taking steps to ensure that the government doesn't steal it.
Mm-hmm.
Sad story in health, and maybe a shout out to Dan so we can start pre-bunking.
We'll be onto it.
We recently discussed what I thought was pretty eye-opening evidence of an association between childhood vaccinations and SIDS. Kids who die suddenly after vaccination. And let's face it, after COVID, the died suddenly thing seems to be real, doesn't it? There were plenty of adults who died suddenly after that particular injection. And also evidence that a lot of kids appear to be dying shortly after vaccines as well. Sad story from the US because a mother whose fraternal twins, so non-identical twins, died suddenly a week after they were vaxxed, has a year hence been charged with murder. So they took a while to do it and they had to wait until she sued the American Academy of Pediatrics because she claims the vaccines killed the kids. They've hit that by charging her with murder. Now, that's a dreadful story, which we'll go into.
Yeah, bloody hell, terrible.
And there's been a lot of vax shilling in the mainstream media recently with the RSV story. Everybody's going to get RSV, rush out and get your shots. And so our ABC has falsely claimed that Senator Malcolm Roberts has falsely claimed that the COVID vaccines caused miscarriages. And I'm going to present a couple of studies that indicate that, yeah, it does look like that's true. So the ABC falsely claimed that Malcolm Roberts falsely claimed.
Yeah, right. The ABC actually, credible news outlet, really? I mean, it wouldn't be
my single source of truth, mate.
Yeah, of course. It would not be in existence unless it was given, or our money was taken off us to give them $1.3 billion a year.
And it always used to puzzle me, given that the ABC was always attacking the conservative side of politics, how come the conservative side of politics never shut them down? And of course, it's totally clear to me now there is no conservative side of politics. Labor and Liberal are the same. They're both happy to have the ABC peddling their propaganda.
Yeah, of course they are.
In government overreach, we had a feel-good story this week where Victoria's imported police commissioner, a New Zealander, apparently jumped to the rescue when the local plod were having trouble arresting a chappie. So he swung into it and assisted with the arrest. When you look further into it, it wasn't him, it was his armed security detail that did it. And the reason they were chasing the guy is that someone said, he's armed with a knife. In fact, after they searched him, they found a chisel in his pocket. They had to search him to do it. So he wasn't brandishing it by any means. But yeah, the effective story is this. Our wise rulers get armed security details. Members of the public get tasered and arrested for hidden chisels.
Well, how long before forks? You accidentally have a fork in your lunchbox and take a fork to work with in your lunchbox. You get searched, and hey, that could be a weapon next too.
Yep. And I did a little bit of reading around the definition of what weapons can you have or carry or use for self-defense. And I might mention that slightly as well. And to finish out, another diversity fail because, oh noes, they've cancelled a program which was designed to encourage females to become professional firefighters. And the mainstream media portrayed this as, a terrible thing, female discrimination, etc., etc. We had this great program which was encouraging women to become professional firefighters. But if you look into the story, they admit that there is no discrimination against women who want to be professional firefighters. The only problem is they have to pass the same standards as men. And of course, not many of them can. So the story which is portrayed as some sort of discrimination against women is just another example of men and women not being interested in or fit for the same sorts of jobs. So we'll have a look at that as well. So...
yeah, very interesting. I remember we did a story. You did a few stories back in past the 100 episodes that covered the female and firefighters and the big, recruitment drive for that. We covered that a few times.
Yep. And throughout the Western world, whenever a society is completely open to women doing whatever job they want, so in other words, if there are no systemic restrictions, you find that the sex difference between certain occupations gets wider, not narrower. So the argument that, there's not enough firefighters in the West because they're discriminated against, if you remove all discrimination, you get even less because they don't want to do it or they're not qualified to do it. But, it's always portrayed as any sort of sex difference in any sort of outcome. If it's a woman that's not equally representative, that's discrimination. I've yet to hear any similar cries to get more men into nursing or early childhood care or any of those things. And to be frank, there are reasons why you don't want men in early childhood care.
Horses for courses, mate. Hunter-gatherer and nurturer-carer.
And you will see this in the Commonwealth Games, because I guarantee you there won't be any 4 foot tall, short, fat people in the sprint races. It's not discrimination. They're just not qualified to do it. Right. Updates time. Yeah, so as mentioned, the Gulf War is back on, although I've said all along it's never really stopped. And it's very important. So the MOU, the sort of ceasefire while we work it out thing, lasted about 3 weeks of its 60 days with breaches all along. Israel broke it almost immediately by continuing to destroy stuff in Lebanon, which was point number one in the I think 14-point MOU, was that Israel will stop military operations. There'll be a ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, Israel sort of ceased fire, so they stopped to some extent rocketing and shelling, but they just used their armoured D9 bulldozers to go in and bulldoze Lebanese villages. They said, well, it's not combat, is it? So, yeah, it was broken almost from the start, and it's back on in earnest this week because the US has been bombing Iran for many a day. And the reason they did that is because Iran missile struck a couple of ships in the Gulf. Now, Iran was absolutely entitled to do that because, again, one of the early points in the agreement, the ceasefire, was that Iran would control the passage of all shipping through the strait. The straits were open provided the ships liaised with Iran about passage. They had to coordinate and get permission. So the US tried to do an end run around that by saying, we'll just sail through the southern bit, which the MOU prohibited. It said, if you want to transit the Gulf in a ship, you have to do it with Iranian control. So the US tried to get around that. So Iran reached out and touched a couple of ships that were trying to sneak through via the unapproved route without permission. And so the US used that as an excuse to go back to bombing, which, of course, is what they wanted to do.
Of course,
so,
yeah.
I said very early on, the Schwerpunkt of this war, the key point, the thing that determines whether you win or lose, is whether the strait is open or closed. And the strait has effectively been closed for months now. there was a small bump in traffic during the first 3 weeks of the so-called ceasefire, but it didn't even go up to a quarter of what it previously had been. And that left, a lag of many months as well. So the strait is formally closed again. It's pretty much always been closed, which means Iran is still winning this war. And Trump's doing another one of Einstein's, same thing again, but expecting a different result, because he's attempting to open the strait by closing it with a blockade. And that didn't work last time, and I can't imagine how it might work this time. So I do hope all of you took the opportunity to go out and buy a couple of jerry cans and store some cheap fuel, because already fuel prices are back over. Diesel here is back over the $2 mark, and you might remember it went over the $3 mark in the early stages of the war.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, I'm not going to do a lot on this unless something interesting happens, but we might mention it slightly each week until it crystallizes.
Yep. Who is this? The president that was meant to be the one that stops all wars, Bruce? And
wasn't he going to stop the Ukraine war on day one with a phone call?
Yep. How's that working out for him?
And he's ended the Iran war, I think, about 39 times.
Yeah.
Now, to recap the big picture here, it's not just about oil in the Persian Gulf. 20% of the world's oil does come out through the strait, and so that's largely stopped. But there's a lot of other important stuff comes out as well. 30% of the world's fertilizer comes out through there, and a lot of the world's sulfur comes out through there. And sulfur is a very key industrial substance. And the reason a lot of it comes out of the Gulf is because oil's got sulfur in it. So the refineries in the Gulf, which are refining local oil into diesel or avgas or whatever else, are also producing sulfur. And sulfur is incredibly important for making sulfuric acid, which is needed for mining and a whole lot of other key industrial processes. Now, fertilizer is interesting. I said to myself, the Gulf is desert. Why would 30% of the world's fertilizer be made in the Persian Gulf? I mean, sure, they can sell it, but, why is that something that is happening there rather than, in the US or Australia or someplace close to where you need it? And it's an interesting case study, because the reason that a lot of fertilizer is made in the Middle East is because you need petroleum to do it and you need cheap energy to do it, both of which are obviously abundant in the Gulf. So our wise rulers, we could do this at home. We've got petrochemicals here, we've got petroleum. We could be refining our own fertilizer here. We're not doing it because we don't have the cheap energy, and we're not allowed to use our oil. So our wise rulers have said that oil is dirty, and we have to do what you see in the picture, which is we have to capture sunlight. Now, the problem with that is, even if it wasn't a terrible way of producing reliable electricity, and it is a terrible way because it's not reliable, wind factories and solar factories do not produce sulfur. They do not produce any of the precursor chemicals that you get out of a barrel of oil. A barrel of oil doesn't just turn into petrol. It turns into thousands of other chemicals, even at scale, things like fertilizer and sulfuric acid. You get zero of those from your solar panels and your wind fans. Zero. So even if this worked for electricity, the whole net zero thing is going to deprive us of every other benefit you can get from hydrocarbons, which, by the way, we've got 100 years of oil in the ground in Australia and 1,000 years of coal. The only reason we're not allowed to use it is because our wise rulers said it's dirty. Not so dirty we can't send it overseas and let the Chinese have it. We're just not allowed to have it ourselves.
They'll change all that. They'll change all that because they'll want more AI infrastructure. They want to get on the bandwagon for the AI, all the sheds and the AI centres.
Now, AI ain't going to run off intermittent power, which is what solar and wind farms are. So AI is going to run off natural gas, which is apparently clean, unless it comes out of the back end of a cow, in which case they call it methane and it's killing us all. So we've got to get rid of our cows. But if it comes out of the ground, it's the same thing. CH3 comes out of the ground, it's clean. You're allowed to have it.
Yep, of course.
All right. So I've said many times the golf thing is very important and serious, and it ain't over by any means. And you might recall that the in-country fuel stores dashboard that I had been using in the early stages of the war is being turned into something better. So last week I said, I haven't been able to find this for weeks. And this site used to say, okay, this is how much fuel is in Australia, this much diesel, jet fuel, petrol, etc. So for some reason, instead of leaving that up at a time when it was critical information, they decided, you know what, we'll take it down and build it again. Now,
they're going to build it so good, like Bruce, just like the new bomb site.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, don't worry about any of that, Mark, because Albo said it's sweet. We got plenty of fuel, right? Billions of litres due to arrive. And due to arrive's another story. Why aren't we making it here? There's only 2 refineries left. There used to be a dozen a decade ago. But fear not. Albo says it's sweet. There's plenty of fuel. And if you want to check that, you can't because they're rebuilding the website into something better. Now, fortunately, I did manage to find an alternate website which gives you the same data. And this is it. It's called Last Drop if you want to have a look at it. And what's on Last Drop is not encouraging because the situation, if anything, is worse in Australia than it was a few months ago when the Gulf War kicked off. So our in-country stocks of petrol, a bit over a month, diesel is a month, and aviation fuel is a bit under a month. So does that sound good? Does that sound like enough?
Yeah, they're probably not that worried about it because they'll find a reason to lock us down so we won't need to use our cars and stuff anyway, Bruce.
And I remember Dr. Dan criticising me because I said, I can see fuel rationing and lockdowns coming. And he said, ha, it hasn't happened. Patience, grasshopper. Patience, grasshopper.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that's the website there if you want to track along for yourself. Yeah, we're sitting on a month's worth of fuel. So if fuel stopped coming for some reason in Australia, you got less than 4 weeks of doing what you're doing. And obviously they would massively crack down early to preserve what was here for essential services. You know, a bit like during COVID, you know, Bunnings could open, but the local hardware shop couldn't. Macca's could open, but the corner deli couldn't because they weren't essential. You understand? All right.
The most important one in Victoria was the brothels, apparently, Bruce. That was close contact, just as close as you get, I guess.
Dan Murphy's and brothels, essential services.
Yep.
Churches.
Shut
down.
That's it.
Shut down.
Yep. Add a bit of amusement on the television, and everybody was sweet.
Bit of bread and circuses.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So update on a previous story where we discussed one of the pushes that's come along during the Gulf War is that we should do biofuels rather than hydrocarbon fuels. So grow ethanol, put it in the petrol, and I talked about all the reasons why that's a disaster. Water forms in it. Or we can use canola or some other grain and make biodiesel out of it. And I looked at this official publication from the US, which actually looked at the inputs. And I discovered that you need enormous amounts of water to grow biofuels, either ethanol or biodiesel. And in fact, to make a litre of either, you needed more than a tonne of water. Whereas if you just drilled it out of the ground, you needed 6 litres. So biofuels, which are supposedly kind to the environment, are hugely intensive of water, if nothing else. And water is something that maybe we should be careful of in Australia, particularly if we've got an option. Why would we put 1,500 litres of water into a litre of biodiesel when we can just pull it out of the ground and use all that water to grow something else, grow food instead of growing fuel?
Okay. Wow, what a novel idea, mate. Yeah.
Right. So from a friend of the channel, Danny, he sent me this story from Wales.
Hey, Danny. I hope Danny's going well. Good on you. Big shout out to Danny when you're watching, mate. Good on you, brother. Brother from another mother.
Yeah, isn't he? And he said he didn't like the new jingle because it was hard for him to listen to with his bionic ears.
Oh, sorry about that. Well, I'll have to work on something.
Discrimination.
So it is, isn't it?
Danny flagged this story from Wales, and he notes that the greenies love telling us how we have to stop eating meat because it's killing the planet. And here in this story, the headline of the story gave an example. So 1 kilogram of beef requires 15 tons of water to produce. Obvious answer, we can't eat beef. We can't afford it. It's bad for the planet. We just have to eat bugs. That was the sort of
course
implication. It's terribly wasteful to be doing this when we could be growing plants instead.
That wouldn't be from the you will own nothing and be happy mob, would it?
Well, you certainly won't be eating meat.
Mm.
Now, the Post noted that, okay, let's go into this a little bit more clearly. Even if it's true that you need 15 tons of water to make a kilogram of beef, where is that water coming from? What is that water? Remember, this story is from Wales, and they said this wet cow sits out on a green hillside in the rain, and you're saying we can't, not allowed to have the water. So the story then split into, said there's two forms of water. There's green water, and green water in Wales is stuff that falls from the sky, drops on the ground and makes it turn green. So it's rain. Now, green water is free, especially in Wales, because it falls out of the sky, drops on the ground, and if it doesn't get used, it runs away or evaporates. Nobody benefits if we stop that cow consuming 15 tons of rain. And the other form of water that they used in the analysis is what they call blue water. And blue water is water that comes out of the reticulated system. It comes out of pipes, comes out of taps, is pumped through irrigation, etc. So you've got green and blue water. And as the story said, what actually matters is the blue water, because the green water is free. It's not like it gets used for something else, it runs off or evaporates or whatever. So the only water that matters is the blue water, because the blue water is coming in a pipe, and the blue water could therefore be used for something else. You could argue, use it to grow bugs, use it to produce biodiesel, use it to fill your bath, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when they looked at the blue water component of this, was actually all the other way around. If you deleted the free water from the rain bit from the equation, growing beef was more efficient in terms of water than just about any plant. And so they listed pistachios. To make a kilo of pistachios, you need 7 tons. Almonds, you need nearly 4 tons. Walnuts, etc., etc. And you get a kilo of beef with 500 litres of water instead of 7 tons. So by any of the important metrics, the beef is actually a better way of growing food, water-wise, than is all the things that the greenies would like us to do: eat bugs, eat plants, etc., etc.
Very
so
interesting.
Again, just an example of how easy it is to be deceptive if you're pushing an agenda.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yep. It's the information they want to sell you. Yep.
But it's actually more complex than that. Because if you want to grow a biofuel, if you want to grow canola into diesel, if you want to grow ethanol, etc., the sort of land that you need to do it on an industrial scale has to be wide and flat. It's called broadacre farming. So if you want to use your land for canola, it's got to look like that. And by the way, it's got to have large gas guzzling, diesel guzzling machines to do it. So it ain't clean anyway. But even if it was, there's a huge difference between the land that you can use to grow crops versus the land that you can use to grow cattle or sheep or any sort of livestock. They're not interchangeable bits of land. And in fact, in many cases, livestock are raised on land that is not suitable for broadacre farming because it's too hilly, too wet, too rocky, whatever. So that's another deceit, the sort of argument that, if we got rid of all the cows, we could grow so much more protein in terms of plants. No, you can't, because the two land isn't interchangeable. You know, you look at the average sheep farm around Australia, they're pretty arid, dry places. You ain't growing canola on it. Just doesn't work. It's not the same land. They're not interchangeable. So the greenies actually want us to stop doing this, and we can't replace it with crops. Doesn't work.
Yeah, of course so. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. You see, like, I drive through my little bit of countryside here, where I am, pretty hilly around Sellex Hill and all that, and there's sheep up and down the hill, and you know, there's like so many of them. You can't, as you said, like you just can't grow other stuff on it. So why not?
Yeah. So, and here's another thing. So I'm old enough to remember when leaded fuel was phased out. So it came in stages, started in the 90s, but by early 2000s, you were not allowed to sell a car in Australia that required leaded fuel. And the reason for that is that the lead in the fuel went through the combustion process, came out of the exhaust, got into the air, and caused health problems. So, and that was fair enough. That was, you know, lead is a toxin, it's a heavy metal. So great, I agree with that. So what worries me here is if we go the biodiesel route, and we're using broadacre farms to grow canola, I'm pretty sure that's going to be drenched in Roundup. And I have huge concerns about Roundup, glyphosate, as a health risk. And it's extensively used in agriculture in Australia, despite the US court recently ruling that it's a carcinogen. The companies appealed for an exemption. And a lot of our food gets sprayed with Roundup. There's two reasons for doing that. One is to kill the weeds, and Monsanto and others produce what's called Roundup ready crops. These are Roundup resistant crops. So you got your canola there as an example. I don't know if you can really do it with canola. It's resistant to Roundup, so you can spray that with Roundup. The weeds die and the crop doesn't. Now, the other use of Roundup in broadacre farming is to do what they call dessiccate it. So a lot of grain crops, they spray with Roundup to kill, so they can harvest the whole crop with equal dryness in the grains. It's called desiccant. Instead of, if you just let it sort of mature at its own rate, then some of the grains mature before the others. Maybe they open up, drop on the ground, you lose them. So there's a lot of Roundup sprayed on broadacre crops in Australia. Now, if we include biofuels, I guarantee you all the health stuff would go away. We can spray as much glyphosate as we want on the canola because it's not food. We're going to make diesel out of it. And what worries me is, sure, you make diesel out of it and then you burn it, and maybe some of that gets aerosolized, just like the lead used to get aerosolized. So I'm concerned about biodiesel for that reason as well.
Tricia's saying here that Roundup has been detected in breast milk.
My understanding is Roundup is detected in just about everything, even organic produce. You can find traces of Roundup in it because it's ubiquitous. It blows around, etc., etc.
Well, they're trying to get us whichever way you go. Chemicals, vaccines, bloody every way you look, they're trying to get us.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned vaccines, because Australia's pesticides regulator, the experts, in other words, the APVMA, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, is come out in the safe and effective camp with regards to glyphosate.
Of course.
Despite the US court saying, yes, it's a carcinogen and it causes Hodgkin's lymphoma, the Australian experts say, no, it's safe and effective. Safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. Okay. Yes, I've heard that before, and I'm just putting a little question mark there. Isn't it amazing? Safe and effective. Everything labelled safe and effective, isn't it?
Yeah, and as Dr. Philip Altman, who used to work for the regulators, has clearly outlined, and he has the experience to do so, is that the term safe and effective shouldn't be used in in regards to medicines anyway, and they did. That's what they used all the way through COVID, and a few people have written about that, about how it shouldn't have been. Nothing. Our Health Minister Greg Hunt had no basis to turn around on national television saying, "Here's the story. It's safe and effective."
As far as I'm concerned, safe and effective is a red flag, danger warning signal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, enough about that. Fine.
What's that? You probably know what that is. What's paraquat? Is that another chemical?
Yeah, paraquat is a nasty pesticide. It's toxic, and a lot of farmers in India and other places kill themselves by drinking it.
Wow.
I've certainly treated casualties who've drunk it. And the nasty thing about paraquat is that it's basically irreversible. There's no cure. You can consume paraquat accidentally or deliberately, and you look perfectly fine. And over the next few days, you get sick and die, and there's absolutely nothing medicine can do about it.
Wow, that's crazy stuff.
I'm sure it's safe and effective, though.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is. We'll be spraying that around next.
Let's move on to money and finance. So in the setting of the Gulf War back on, sort of happening what you'd think. So the real monies, gold and silver, have gone down. And the reason for that is when people get scared, they sell assets and grab cash because everybody takes cash. It's called a flight to safety, even though it's not safe. So it's no surprise to me that the alternative monies, the precious metals, have dropped. Bitcoin's held its own. And oil's bumped up. Oil was up 16% week on week. And in fact, it's a bit further than that now. It was up into the 90s again today. And I did watch some podcasts during the week, which made a point that I hadn't fully realised. And that is the oil price is the input price. You know, you get a barrel of oil. It's that thick black stuff. You get a price for that. But you really need to do something with that oil. You need to send it through a refinery and turn it into diesel or petrol or avgas or whatever you're making.
Plastics or pharmaceuticals or whatever.
Yep. And the limiting factor currently is refining it, not sourcing it. And that's been exacerbated by mysterious refinery fires around the world. It's been exacerbated by the Ukrainians targeting Russian refineries with drones. It's been exacerbated by refinery damage in the Gulf. And so at the moment, there's actually a bigger refinery capacity shortage than there is an oil shortage. And that perhaps explains why the oil prices haven't bounced as much as we might have thought. Although, remember that term crack spread? The finished product prices are very high. In fact, the crack spread on diesel, the difference between the price of a barrel of oil and the price of a barrel of diesel, is enormous. It's never been bigger. And so I would expect to see the Australian domestic fuel prices bumping up for that reason. Refining is the difficult bit. And in fact, the Brent oil price was up over 90 today.
Government leaders are baffled at refineries getting damaged and blown up, and yes, there's a lot of interesting things happening in the world, isn't there, Bruce?
No one could have predicted this, Mark.
Not at all.
All right, story from New York in the finance section. And New York, amazingly, because the voters there should know better, recently elected an openly socialist mayor, Mamdani. He's a Muslim as well. So again, that seems like the New Yorkers have got short memories because remember, if you believe the story, a couple of fairly major buildings came down in New York in a terrorist attack 20 years ago. Nevertheless, the New Yorkers have thought it'd be a good idea to elect a socialist as mayor. And when he ran, he said he was going to tax the rich. He ran for mayor on a tax the rich platform. Guess what happened when the people voted for him, Mark? He taxed the rich. So, as a result, Laffer's law and Riston's law leapt into place. So there's Mamdani there. Now, this story says that the top 1% of earners pay half the income tax. Huge amount. So if they leave, you lose half your tax base immediately. And they are leaving because no one could have predicted this. They thought, okay, you want to steal my money, I'll just leave and take it with me. And detail from the story at the bottom there, the Citizen Budget Commission published an analysis Monday, finding that New York's shrinking share of the nation's billionaires, because they're leaving, cost the state an estimated $10 billion in lost income tax revenue in 1 year alone.
Wow. Who could have predicted that?
No one could have predicted.
No, of course
so,
not.
Mamdani ran on the ever popular, Eat the Rich platform, except the rich didn't want to be eaten, so they did something about it. So this illustrates a couple of economics laws. You got Riston's law, written by Walter Riston, which basically translates into money goes where it's treated best. So a lot of New York's money has left looking for better treatment. So you got Riston's law. And you've also got the Laffer curve. And the Laffer curve says that there is a certain tax rate at which you collect the most tax revenue. Above or below that, you collect less. It's not a straight line function. So if the tax rate is 0, you collect 0 tax. If the tax rate is 100%, you collect 0 tax because nobody works. And somewhere in the middle is the point where the government gets the most tax. And so if you're already higher up that curve than optimum, increasing tax rates will decrease your tax take. And this is what Mamdani is finding. And it makes sense. So think of it as the opportunity cost of working. So let's say I was working for the ambulance service. My marginal tax rate was 47%, meaning if I do an extra shift, I'll lose nearly half the money because all of it's taxed at the high rate. So if ambulance pages out, say, oh, we need a person to cover this shift tomorrow, I might go, I can't be blowed. I'm going to lose half the money in tax. I just won't do it. So that's an example. Behaviour changes. Now, if your tax rate's 80%, then almost nobody's going to do extra work because why would you bother? You hardly keep any of it. And conversely, not working doesn't cost you as much. So let's say you work in an industry where there's no paid holidays. You want time off, you can take it, but there's no holiday pay. So I might say to myself, I want 2 weeks off. That's going to cost me $5,000 a week. That's going to cost me $10,000 to not work for 2 weeks. Whereas if you're taking half of my money, it's only costing me $5,000 to not work for 2 weeks. It's more attractive to not work. So both sides are true. And yeah, surprise, surprise. Well, here's another friend of the channel, H.L. Mencken. He said, democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it, good and hard. So the New Yorkers know what they wanted. They voted for a socialist, and now they are getting it good and hard because that's what they asked for.
Of course. And of course, the people that can afford to move, which is the people that are earning big dollars, or organizations that are employing people are moving obviously from New York to places where they're not going to get punished as much. So what's left behind is obviously, like you said, the people that voted for this, and they're generally the low to middle income earners that will suffer the most out of these people leaving those areas, and it's a big vicious circle, isn't it? So and that's the same here in Australia with what they're doing here. We'll end up capital gains tax and all that sort of stuff. New Zealand doesn't have anybody encouraging people to come over, so it'll happen here as well. People will just go, you know what, it's too hard to make ends meet here in Australia. We'll move off somewhere else because they can afford to. But again, the low to middle income earners can't. They just can't pack up. Most of them can't pack up or in a position to do so, to move elsewhere where their cost of living isn't as much.
Chunk it down to your local level. If you live in a neighbourhood where you are constantly getting robbed, you're going to move. Why would you stay there if your stuff keeps getting broken and stolen all the time? So you move. The only people left are the ones who can't afford to move. So they've got to live in a slum. Now chunk it up to New York, chunk it up to the national level. The people who can afford to move do. And moving might not mean physically moving. Maybe it means you've got a clever accountant that you pay a lot of money to. You set up a company structure to avoid it. That's what happens. And so the tax burden actually falls upon the people who thought they were going to get a free lunch. They're only free lunch.
Yeah. What was that one? We will destroy the middle class through taxation and inflation. Lenin said in 1919, apparently.
No one could have predicted this, Mark.
Mm.
Yep. And our wise rulers appear to be as clueless as the New Yorkers as well. And a great example is the sin taxes on tobacco. And in this story, you got a former federal police detective saying the sin taxes on tobacco are what you call a policy failure, and they've created an illegal market which enforcement cannot deal with. And we know this. We've all seen the tobacco shop fires and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So what our wise rulers did for our own good, for Eurozika, they actually tripled the tax on tobacco over the last decade. They tripled it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, my first job was opening up Shell Tranmere in about 1983, and price of a pack of 20 ciggies was about $1. If you're really cheap, and they were the non-king size, they're about 87 cents. And if you're getting some blue ribbon band, it might have been $1.17 for a packet.
Yep.
Fast forward now, it's over $50 a packet. And most of that is tax.
Yep.
Tax plus inflation, and inflation is a tax. So our wise rulers tripled the tax take on ciggies in the last decade.
Yep.
As a result, they lost 80% of the market to illegal tobacco, which did not exist because there was no incentive to do it. If a pack of ciggies was $1, it's not worth shipping in illegal chop from China.
Yep.
So after our wise rulers tripled the tax, they lost 80% of the market, which means they lost tax revenue. Laffers learned. And by the way, it's not the cigarette that's illegal. It's the not paying tax that's illegal.
Yep.
They don't care whether you smoke. They care whether you pay your tax on it.
Yep.
So great example, Laffer's curve. You triple the tax on ciggies, you lose your market, and criminals move in to take your market. And we've all seen that. You know, every week here in Victoria, there's yet another story about a tobacconist getting firebombed. There have been hundreds of them set on fire. And this is criminal gangs burning down businesses for people who didn't agree to sell the illegal stuff. You know, nice business you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it.
Yeah.
So they lost most of their tax revenue, and they created an illegal market. And remember, the original intent was to discourage people from smoking for their own good. But the problem with this is 80% of the ciggies now being bought in Victoria are illegal, the price of which is $12 a packet. So not only did they lose their tax revenue, they make cigarettes cheaper for people who wanted to buy them. It is a policy disaster. Nobody could have predicted this, Mark.
No, of course not.
Unless, of course, they read history and they know that this is exactly what happened in the 1920s with Prohibition. One of the big rises of the mafia, one of the big businesses that they collected was illegal booze. When America made alcohol illegal, which was a product that people wanted to have, all they did is create a black market for it, which was incredibly profitable. So, we're seeing exactly the same thing here. They've created a black market for cigarettes, which is very profitable and results in hundreds of businesses being burned down, and results in smokers being able to buy cheaper smokes, zero public health benefit.
Yep, exactly right. And as you've said this before, the comment about whether people smoke or not shouldn't have anything to do with the state. But you have mentioned plenty of times that if it affects the health insurance and other things, if you happen to get cancer, even though you know that the risks are there, then you shouldn't be covered by the people with taxes to pay for your medical bills. But we have Medicare. You can get treated, and you make wrong choices in life, or choices you live with those choices on your own account.
Yeah, but instead we socialise them, so the bad behaviour is free, and the costs are socialised to people who didn't behave badly.
Mm.
If you want to smoke, great. If you get damaged by it, that's your problem. You can self-insure, you can pay for your medical care. But the states come along and said, no, everybody gets free healthcare, which means that the smokers can't smoke. Get rid of the free healthcare bit. Just say everybody can smoke. If you choose to smoke, your problem.
Yep.
Rather than saying everybody gets access to this government service, which means we have to make sure everybody behaves properly. Just cut out the service. Leave it back to individuals.
Yep.
All right. Now, Dr. Dan alert. So I need a siren.
I don't know.
You want a quick check if he's pre-bunked me on?
I couldn't see any pre-bunks. You might actually be working instead of watching today, unless he's, or maybe he's chasing. He's doing research on the other doctor that you had on the other week. Maybe he's chasing him down instead. The one that talked about the child development. Yes.
Yeah, wasn't that a sobering thing too?
It was. Yeah.
Okay, so this week, this is a sad update to a recent story where we showed that there's actually a pretty strong suspicion that SIDS and infant vaccinations are linked. They certainly occur, the SIDS tends to occur shortly after vaccination, which is one of Bradford Hill's criteria of causality. So I thought that was pretty persuasive. And it's therefore sad to see that the US authorities are actually prosecuting a mother, I think in Idaho, for murder after her two twins died day 8 after vaccination. And they're not identical, they're fraternal twins. So what the story said, a district judge in PayId County, Idaho, and I've been to Idaho, revoked the bond for a 23-year-old mother charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of her 18-month-old twins.
Wow. And that was 8 days.
Here's the details. The 2 kids at 18 months went to a horrendously named well baby visit where they got injected with toxins by their paediatrician. I don't know which ones, I don't know how many, etc. But that's the purpose of well baby visits, is to drum up business for vaccines in the US. So the 2 infants became ill within a day, both of them. And she took them down to the emergency room. In fact, during the week before they died, she took them down several times to the hospital and said, my kids are sick. On the first visit, the ER physician said that they have a post-immunisation reaction. So I'm presuming they were irritable, feverish, nausea, vomiting, etc. So they had the shots. They were well. They had a well baby visit. They got the shots. They got sick within a day. They went to the ER the same day. The doctor said it's a vaccine reaction. So that was the time course. And there were multiple back and forths to the hospital over the next week before they were found dead in bed on the morning of the 8th day. So they died suddenly overnight.
So they were getting treated. So she was going back. There was issues post vaccination already, and she was already being seen at the hospital and all this sort of stuff. So fully documented and known. Yep.
And the argument that she would kill the kids despite taking them to the hospital several times. Why would she do that?
Yeah, why would you care?
Well baby visit.
Yeah, why would you care? Exactly.
Anyway, after about a year's worth of investigation, she's been charged with 2 counts of murder. And as the story says, investigators ruled out other possible causes, including vaccines.
Oh, you're right.
Now, I'd like to know how they ruled it out, given that the first doctor on the first day said this is a vaccine reaction. Your kids got sick because of vaccination.
Yeah, I don't know, Bruce. We all know that you're not classed as vaccinated until 30 days after, Bruce. So if something happens, if you happen to die within 30 days of receiving a vaccine, isn't that what we were told for the last 5 years? You're unvaccinated if you've been vaccinated for the first 30 days?
That was certainly true in COVID. Yeah, 2 weeks after your second shot. So obviously we're not party to all the details and the evidence here, but I'm terrified that the investigators have ruled out vaccines because they've looked up some website from the CDC that says vaccines don't cause SIS. Okay, it's not that. Next. I'll bet you. Now, this was a comment to the story, and it was interesting because it took a year to charge her. And in the intervening year, she commenced legal action against the paediatrician and also against the American Academy of Pediatrics. She alleged that the cause of the infant's death was the vaccines that they were given. The doctor was following the schedule, and that's why she sued the American Academy of Pediatrics. So the kids got a vax. Kids were well. Kids got a vax, got sick straight away. They died on day 8. In the intervening months, she commenced legal action saying that the vaccines caused it. Plus a year, she then got charged with murder. And this comment explains that. This article fails to mention that Ms. Shaw was suing the American Academy of Pediatrics. This could be the real reason for the charge. In this world, I can believe it. I can believe it. You know, if you go against the narrative, I can believe it.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Yep.
Because you're not allowed to say that. I certainly wouldn't be able to post that in the advertiser comment section, as we showed last week.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because you'd definitely be censored. That's for sure. Because the advertiser doesn't like hearing from you, Bruce.
Yeah, well, they've ruled out everything. I have to say, apparently, experts.
Yeah.
Now, this sad story brings to mind another phenomenon, which is shaken baby syndrome, and this is another diagnosis that's given for SIDS. So kids that are found to have suddenly died, a number of them are judged to have died because they were shaken, you know, in a fit of rage. Parent shook them. And this story was written by a US defense lawyer who spent a career defending parents who've been charged with shaken baby syndrome after their kids are found suddenly dead after vaccination. And this is what that defense lawyer said. As an expert, she's actually, apparently there's a annual shaken baby syndrome conference in the States every year. And even though she's a lawyer, she's gone to all 20 of the last 20 years. She goes as a delegate and watches what goes on. And she said that in the 20 years that she's been there, she's yet to see any convincing evidence that the syndrome even exists. So she said, over the past 2 decades, every major independent review that has attempted to assess the scientific foundation for shaken baby syndrome, now rebranded as abusive head trauma, has raised serious concerns. And what they're basing this on is that some of the kids who die suddenly are found to have microhemorrhages in the eyes, in the brain, etc. This is not, we found fractures, you know, it's not like this kid was clearly beaten the crap out of it. Just they find this micro evidence that, okay, the kid was shaken. So it's not bruising and fractures, it's internal stuff. And could that be something else? Well, this paper said it was. It said there is evidence that vaccine reactions can cause what you find that is called shaken baby syndrome. So in this case, elevated blood histamine caused by vaccinations and vitamin C deficiency may mimic shaken baby syndrome. Maybe it doesn't mimic, maybe it is shaken baby syndrome. So I just think, wouldn't it be a catastrophe if you were innocent, your kid did have SIDS, and you were then charged with murder afterwards? Wouldn't that be an utter catastrophe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe this is what's happening in Idaho as we speak, death of twins.
Yeah. And here you are as a grieving parent that's, you know, knows something to be true, and you've been persecuted, hauled over the coals. I mean, we've seen that so many times, haven't we? Like, they just try and bury you, these massive organisations that, you know, that make billions of dollars a year out of a product they don't want to demonise and have it see the light of day, that there might be some correlation.
Cannot be questioned. Exactly right.
Lots of things that can't be questioned in life, isn't there? Before you move on, they're still on vaccines or still the same part?
I'll come back to that. So it's your show, mate. Hop up.
No, just the previous section. It was going to happen a little bit anyway, because we obviously got some smokers that watch, but in a previous discussion that we had, and just want to throw a couple of COVID again. Remember, Mark, people who destroy their health with junk food and become obese would then also have to be responsible for paying for their healthcare, not just smokers. It's a slippery slope, and I don't disagree
100%.
with what you say. Don't disagree with what you're saying there, and obviously, yeah, 1984 punks, people get gorging on fat sugars in something state. Look, I don't disagree with that. We've talked about it before, Bruce, and I've swayed since, doing these podcasts with you more towards a libertarian thinking around the state having control of what you do and the cost of healthcare and everything else like that. And totally agree. If junk food and all that's shown to cause morbid health issues and all that sort of stuff, then sure, you're responsible for it. Like, and we talked about, you being responsible for your own health and well-being and everything. And I think I mentioned in previous shows that I believe that the cigarettes of old, or even the packet, the rollies I talked about, because I used to smoke them when I was younger. They don't have nowhere near as many chemicals as what I believe the new stuff has in it. And who knows? I don't know whether that's the stuff that's causing issues with people's health. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't an attack on smokers. I don't actually care. Like, you smoke, that's all good. And this goes with everything that we know. We even talked about seatbelts, Bruce, and that if you don't wear a seatbelt in a car crash, you die. And ultimately, should you get fined for not wearing a seatbelt? There shouldn't be in it. If you're dumb enough not to wear a seatbelt, even though all the evidence is out there to say that you're going to die in a car crash, well, you deal with it. That's up to you. It shouldn't be up for others to pay for that cost. No, it's kind of around the sort of thinking where I was coming from with that. So wasn't bagging smokers. So if you thought that was the case, no, I'm not. But it was kind of more of a generalized thinking around that.
Yep, no, 100% agree. I choose not to smoke, but I fully respect anybody else's choice if they do want to smoke. In fact, during the COVID era, my elderly next door neighbours sheepishly said, "We're too scared to leave the house. Next time you go down to the supermarket, can you get, a pouch of rolly tobacco and some papers?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, of course, no worries." And I was a bit shocked because I walked into the tobacconist, having not seen a price of tobacco since I was a schoolboy selling 80-cent packets. I think a pouch of rollies was either one or two of them was over $100. And like Paul Hogan last week, fair go. I'm not buying a carton.
Yeah, exactly right. Absolutely. And look, that goes the same with drinking. I like my red wine, and I drink a bit, and that should be the same. People should say the same to me. There's a risk to, kidney functions, all that with drinking and all that. If I happen to get cooked with that, it's the same thing. It's the same thinking along those lines. So anyway, just wanted to explain that, guys. So all good.
You're an adult. If you want to make, you've got the freedom to make bad choices, and you've got the freedom to suffer the consequences.
The beauty of my creator gave me is free will and choice.
Except our wise rulers don't regard you as a free person. They regard you as livestock, and they want to control what you eat, what you drink, where you go, because you are their property. That's the reason we have the big government we have, because they don't regard you as a free citizen. They regard you as livestock.
They want to be your God, and the God that I believe in doesn't want. If you gave me free choice, I make bad decisions. That's on me. I make good decisions. That's on me as well.
Yeah. Right. So
we're back to it. That one there, I think. There we go.
Yeah, so I was looking for the tab. So the powers of darkness this week appear to be getting worried about the One Nation popularity, because you would have seen a number of hit pieces. Oh my God, Pauline Hanson's talking to Tommy Robinson.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Pauline Hanson walked down the street in Luton, and Tommy Robinson said, "This is not the Britain that I grew up in," getting passed by burqas. Oh my God, Pauline Hanson wore a burqa into the Senate. Outrageous. So clearly the message has gone out. It's time for the hit pieces on One Nation, because they're doing well. People are hearing what they want to say, and a number of people are going, thank heavens. And so the latest iteration of that is this attack on One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts. So the headline says, One Nation's Malcolm Roberts falsely claimed COVID-19 vaccines caused miscarriages.
So,
So,
and they also come after him about the cloud seeding, chemtrails, I think, because he made a so they'll try to get him for that. So they're trying to besmirch him in any way, shape, or form they can.
Did he falsely claim that as well?
Yeah. Shh.
Now, the ABC, not only in the headline but in the text, stated flat out this was a false claim. He falsely claimed it. And they said because it contradicts medical evidence. Well, you cross the word evidence out, put experts, if you like. And the story referenced some published papers, including there is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines are associated with increased risk of miscarriage, according to a systematic review of 21 pooled studies involving 150,000 women published in 2023. Now, so they've said, no, the published studies say he was wrong, okay? And indeed, I thought the bit in blue was interesting. One of the studies they referenced was from the New England Journal of Medicine. Remember that from a week ago, the 50% of what we publish is untrue journal, that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was one of their weapons. But they didn't mention this study for a reason, and this study came out 2 years later. So they looked at a 2023 study of 150,000. And then they've neglected this 2 years later study of 1.3 million women in the Czech Republic. So this is a 2 years newer, 10 times bigger study, which they didn't actually mention. And just to refresh you, and I've covered this study earlier. So this study from the Czech Republic looked at the conception rates for all 1.3 million women in Czechia, who were deemed to be eligible for conception. So aged 18 to 39, that's a fair proxy. This study of every single potentially fertile woman in Czechia over that period found a 1/3 lower conception rate for women who'd been vaccinated compared to those who hadn't.
Wow.
1/3 lower. So I don't know why the ABC was saying there is no evidence. What about this evidence?
Yeah.
What about this evidence? And this came after the studies that they referenced, newer and bigger.
Inconvenient, Bruce. Very inconvenient.
So a couple of comments about that. So first off, in medicine, if we have conflicting studies, if you have some studies that say something is safe and some studies that say the same thing is not safe, we roll out what's called the precautionary principle. The fact that some studies say that doing something is unsafe is a red flag. It tells you restrict the use of the product, study it further. You don't go, yeah, but I've got a study here that says it was safe, so don't worry about that. That's not how it works. You know, and it's like Russian roulette. Even if 5 studies of pulling the trigger while a gun up to your head says no problem, if 1 out of 6 studies says there's a problem, you listen to the 1 out of 6. That's how it works in medicine. You don't just go click, click, click. No, it's totally safe. And yet the ABC did that. They said Malcolm Roberts falsely reported this. In fact, the ABC falsely reported that Malcolm Roberts falsely reported. That's what really happened.
Yeah.
So just a reminder of something we concluded last week after examining the comment section of the Advertiser.
Yep.
Media is not there to report the news. The media is there to report the narrative. What a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep, and that's the only reason that they've gotten away with so much that they've gotten away with government bureaucrats, large corporations, is because of the power that's held by the media and the narrative that they can sway. Because unfortunately, 80% of our fellow countrymen and women are still either head in the sand because of amusement, bread and circus, or they still follow the narrative of the easy access 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever broadcasts, ABC, SBS, because they just don't make time to research and think for themselves.
They sit down in their chairs with their mouths open with this visual diarrhea hitting them in the face. And they don't even have access to alternate views because the mainstream media works to shut that off. And again, heard an interesting analogy during the week which said we might have freedom of speech. You and I, we haven't been shut down so far. Although occasionally you get a podcast nuked. We might have freedom of speech, but we don't have freedom of reach.
Exactly. Yep.
Shadow ban.
Yep.
Yep. You can't find it, etc., etc., etc.
Yep.
So.
Yep. It's still censorship. It's still censorship. So they allow you on there. They allow you the platform, but they just restrict how far it goes. Exactly right. Absolutely. And what have we got here? Psychosis 99999 said one modification: unsafe acts are like Russian roulette with 5 chambers loaded. There's a different way of looking at it.
Well, it varies. Depends on how unsafe, doesn't it? Most people who drink drive on the way home don't crash on that particular trip. In fact, it's probably verboten to say it, but did have a couple of books I can dig out, which was called Freakonomics, which looked at interesting risk-reward cases, and one of them was drink driving. And in fact, you are far safer to drive home from the pub drunk than you are to walk home from the pub drunk.
Right. Well, for yourself, maybe. I mean, you're sheltered in a car, but God help any pedestrian or cat or dog that walks across the road in front of you.
Yeah, quite right. Quite right. All right. Enough of that said. So diversity. So another gender equity story from the ABC, and here they're lamenting the fact that Queensland's special camp for encouraging women to become professional firefighters has been scrapped. And this, get this, Mark, despite low diversity rates.
Wow. Actually, I think it's about 12 months ago that we covered this the first time, Bruce, when it must have come out, yeah.
Well, even though they know that not many women are professional firefighters, they've still scrapped this camp designed to encourage them. Where's the courage? Where's the camp for men who want to go into early childcare? Probably the same numbers.
Yeah,
very low diversity there, I would have thought. Okay, so that's the story. Now, the story then self-detonates because it notes that professional firefighters have to pass the same physical standard whether they're women or men. And I support that. Firefighting is very hard work. I'm an amateur volunteer firefighter. I don't do anything hard or special. I don't carry 20 kilos worth of breathing apparatus into a building, lug a heavy hose upstairs, find an unconscious casualty, and then firemen carry them out. I don't do that. I'm not capable of doing that. I'm not fit to do it, so I don't do it. And in fact, I used to have breathing apparatus training, and I gave that up when I was about 50. I said, this is not an old man's job. Professional firefighters, they have to do all of this. They have to lug breathing apparatus, heavy hoses, you name it. So they have to meet a very high standard, far higher than I have to as a volunteer. So hats off to them. And this story says, if you meet the standard, you can apply for the job. What's wrong with that? So the story says there is no discrimination. There is no discrimination. So the reason there aren't a lot of women doing the job is because either they don't want to do it, they're not applying for it, and they've got a special program, or they can't pass the test. They're not qualified to do it.
Mm.
But why would we need a camp that either encourages women to do it when they don't want to, or encourages women to do it when they're not qualified to do it? Why would we even want that camp? Why are we spending money on that?
Mm. Well, the biggest thing it always comes back to is that there used to be, whether it was the army, the police, the fire brigade, there was certain standards of health, fitness, and ability that ensured that you were able to pass that. The same with the army, you rely on each other in very tough situations. The same with the fire brigade, and the same with policing. But unfortunately, what they're doing is they're dropping the standard to allow others in. And this isn't just necessarily women either, Bruce, because look, I mean, I've seen so much footage now of massively overweight police officers trying to run down. I mean, there was a reason you had to be fit as a police officer, jump over fences, chase down a perp, whatever. And now they lower the standard to such extent that anybody can just pass it. And they're no good to the community that they want to do, like that they're trying to serve. How can they chase down someone or jump over fences when you're massively obese and the bar's been dropped because of the standards being dropped, right? For all this sort of stuff. Yeah.
And in a service job, it's not about you as the employee, it's about your customers, the public.
Mm. Yeah.
Firefighters aren't there to drive around in red trucks.
Mm.
They're there to protect and rescue the community. That's their job.
Mm. Yep.
Okay. Anyway, the story did say that only 5% or thereabouts of professional firefighters are females, and that's true across the world, not just an Australian thing. And the camp didn't change it, by the way.
Mm.
And it's the same in volunteer firefighting as well. And like I said, I'm nowhere near the tip of that spear, the professional ranks. I'm a volunteer. And I guarantee you that next time there's bushfire smoke on the horizon, the siren goes off, the vast majority of people are climbing on those trucks will be practical, hardworking, local men, usually straight white men from 40 to 60. To have a single female on a truck is unusual. You do see them, but it's certainly not the norm. And I doubt whether 5 to 10% of volunteer firers who climb on trucks are women. And we have no physical standards. We're desperate for members all the time. If you're available, you turn up when the site, you're getting on my truck. No worries for that. I'm not going, I don't want you because you're a Sheila. Trust me, it's not unknown for me to take the truck out solo. I've done it. Sometimes, the siren goes off in the middle of the night. As you're driving down the station, you think, I hope somebody else is there. So trust me, we aren't picky. If you're interested in doing it, we'll take you. The problem is women just aren't interested in doing it because there's nothing stopping them. We don't have physical standards. We welcome everybody. We hardly see, wouldn't even be 5 to 10% women in the service. Okay.
Yep.
Maybe we need a camp to encourage them.
Encourage anybody. Yeah, exactly right. Yep. And it's horses for courses. Not everybody is in the position to do that. But like you say, the vast majority are usually, semi-retired or pre-retired older fellas. And I get it.
And horses for courses, you go down to the local pony club, 90% of the children will be females. You go around to the local motorcycle club, 90% will be males. They have they like different things. All right, enough of that.
He's a one banjo. I tried out the surface, but couldn't pick up the fire hose there.
It's not easy. So we have multiple sizes of hose. Your typical, the black hose you reel out in a building from those red cabinets. That's a 19 millimeter hose, 36 meters long. On the trucks, we have 25 millimeter reels, and that's what we use for bushfires. We have what's called 38s. Now, 38 is a 38 millimeter hose, 100 feet long. And that weighs 20 or 30 kilos when it's full of water. And if you need 2 or 3 lengths, you might be dragging a lot of weight. And the next size up we might want to use in a building is a 64. And as far as I remember, it's like 100 kilos for one length of hose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
They're not light. I remember I did so many years ago. It would have been over 30, easy over 30 years ago now. I worked in repairing the hoses for the fire brigade. They used to come in, and we used to have to put new nozzles on them and repair patches and all that sort of stuff. Send them back out again. That was pretty heavy stuff. Some of those, yeah. And it'd be much heavier when they're full of bloody water and you've got to drag them around. That's for bloody sure.
That's one of the tricks, actually. You roll out the hose empty and you run down the end, put the nozzle on, then you stick your hand up and say, turn the water on. You don't want to be dragging it.
No, that's right. That's a good idea. Yep. And then you brace yourself properly. Otherwise, you get start flung around. So there was something here from, have you heard about the swinging taxes Labor are applying to volunteer firers in Victoria, apparently?
Yeah, there was a lot of angst a couple of years ago over property taxes. So the spending addict, city-focused Labor government in Victoria massively raised property taxes, which mainly applied to the bush, because you might have one property if you live in the city. If you're a farmer, you might have 10 titles, and your farm might be worth millions, and each title gets a charge. So the emergency services levy was massively increased. So, if you own a decent sized farm, you might be paying thousands of dollars for your fire service levy, which, by the way, you're probably providing. You're probably a member of the fire service. And if you're not, you've probably got a private truck. There's a huge number of farm trucks that turn up at any major fire we go to. So there was huge pushback to that. And as a result, the government introduced a rebate scheme which gave you a partial rebate on one property. And that's where it sits at the moment. So I think we're short of volunteers. Volunteer ambulance is short. SES is short. There's not that many volunteers. Victoria's got, I don't know, pick a number, 5 million residents. I doubt if it's got 100,000 emergency service volunteers. How about you give them a complete rebate of their levy? We're not talking about your rates. We're talking about just your fire service levy. How about you say, if you're a paid up active member of any of the following volunteer units, SES, CFA, ambulance, whatever, you don't have to pay the ESL. Wouldn't that be easier? And it would cost them nothing.
Yeah, of course not, mate. Of course not. They want everything for nothing, and they want to get more from everybody. So Susie was saying something about used to be on the local fire brigade only because she has a heavy vehicle, heavy rigid license, and no one had this to drive the truck, so I had to help in lifting hoses during burn-offs and so forth. So yeah, that's the reason. So look, if you've got an HR, at least it's something they can do for sure.
Yep, exactly. Well done.
If there's shortages, absolutely right. And maybe you can save this for later. We can come back to it. I am aware of it, and there's this alert that's meant to go out on the 27th. I'm not sure if you know about it. Apparently, this emergency alarm being sent to everyone on the 27th, and the emergency service is not wanting to be involved.
Yeah, I'm aware something's coming out, but I don't know any more than that, so I can't add to that.
Yeah, I've seen it in all the social medias already hyping it all up, saying we're going to send this alert out on the 27th at 1 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah. All right, shall we roll along? So in the government section, or perhaps I should call it the rules for thee but not for me section, bit of positive news this week, because Victoria's police commissioner apparently arrested a felon. Well, that was the story anyway. So, in fact, when you looked into the details, apparently the local coppers had failed to arrest somebody after tasing him, and he ran off and crossed paths with the police commissioner, who just happened to be in the area in Melbourne. Now, what the story says, in fact, it wasn't the commissioner who crash tackled the felon, it was his security detail. So he had a security detail in Melbourne. An initial report said that the man was carrying a knife, but when they searched him, what they found was a chisel. So a couple of thoughts there. One is that the police commissioner gets an armed security detail. the member of the public is not allowed to have a hidden chisel.
Rules for thee.
Slight conflict there. And in fact, I looked it up. Not only would the commissioner likely have had an arms, well, he did have an armed security detail. I bet they were wearing at least soft body armor, soft vest. You know, you hardly see a copper out in public these days without at least a soft vest. Now, soft body armor will stop a pistol bullet, but it won't stop a rifle bullet. And it's probably stab proof as well, or stab resistant as well. So I just had a little look up. What is it legal for us to have compared to the police, who's allowed to have an armed security detail and body armor? So ballistic body armor, stuff that'll stop bullets, is a prohibited weapon in every Australian state. So the cops can have it, citizens can't. And they put that, the justification for that is that there is no such thing as a defensive weapon. Yeah, there is. How much damage am I going to do with a soft vest? Similarly, you're not allowed to have pepper spray in most states. That's also classed as a dangerous weapon and is restricted. But our wise rulers can have an armed team. They can have a stab vest, a ballistic vest, a taser, a baton. So there's something special about our rulers, and they get privileges that we don't get.
Yeah, really strange, isn't it? Like they just they want you fully uncovered, defenseless, sheep-like citizenry, because that's what fake gods want. They just want to be able to rule whichever way they can.
And when I AI'd it, the reports generally said the principle in Australia is that public safety takes precedence over personal protection. In other words, collectivism over individuality. That's, you know, as a libertarian, I don't go with that. But again, I just ask, how much mischief could I do with a stab vest?
Beat someone over the head with it? I don't know.
Soft.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just makes you wonder, doesn't it?
They want us disarmed, and they want us to leave it to the experts, remember?
You know what you do instead then, Bruce, is just get, you know, some of the runners and fitness people, they get those weighted vests, you know, they got the weights inside of them. So you just buy one of those, and wherever you walk around or start jogging, if someone challenges, oh, look, I'll use it to do my exercise.
Yeah, you might find intent. And certainly when you're interviewed, don't say it was for my own protection, because that's illegal. Self-defense is not an excuse for any sort of weapon, even a soft.
We are the state. We decide what is best for the greater good. It is for das Allgemeinwohl, and we are the state, so we are responsible for this.
Yeah, well, they're scared of us. That's the problem. You know, the ideal state is where the government's scared of the people, not the other way around.
Yep.
All right, better keep moving. So I discussed how there's been this sort of stunning rise in the polls for One Nation, and that's generated its own set of hit pieces, Malcolm Roberts, Pauline Hanson, and so forth. And this week, this post on Joe Nova's blog, I thought really nicely explained why it is that, as the headline said, the Liberals are ignoring them. The big losers in the rise of One Nation is the Liberal Party. They're going to get
well, they keep digging themselves bigger holes, Bruce. That's the problem.
And this explains why. So from Joe Nova's blog, half the voters are fed up with the carbon dioxide propaganda, and they have no major party to vote for. They don't need PhDs to know that the catastrophe hasn't happened. The predictions were wrong, and the experts all own beach houses. Isn't that beautiful? Anyone with an electricity bill knows that the renewables are expensive, and China burns our coal, but we're not supposed to. Joe Nova's watching the show, Mark.
Yep. Exactly right. Yep, Liberals are so cooked, you know. You hear them like, you know, continuing to bag One Nation, doing everything they can to kind of ridicule them, try and call them out. It's just, they're just burying themselves every time, every bloody news report, whatever. They're so cooked.
good to see. They lost me after the atrocities that they facilitated during COVID.
Yeah.
Never going back.
Yep. Well, that only leaves, as I said, sort of minor parties. Research, if anybody's still interested in voting, obviously, is research your individual candidates, see what they stand for. And, if they belong to any of the major parties, whether it be Liberal, Labor, Greens, whatever, not getting on my ticket.
Yeah. And while we're reading pithy quotes that sort of just nail it, this is from a Canadian blog called Small Dead Animals, which I read a fair bit. And Canada's obviously on the same self-destructive trajectory as Australia and the rest of the West.
Yeah, definitely on par.
And this little paragraph here explained perfectly why your government-protected industries and government programs themselves always grow larger and more distant from their customers, the people. So let me read it. A company that earns guaranteed margins because a regulation, exclusive contract, or closed market keeps competitors out, who's the competitors to government, tends to stop doing the things that keep a business sharp. It stops scrutinising its cost structure, investing in efficiency, or asking how it would cope or what it would change if its customers had somewhere else to go. That's the point. We've got nowhere else to go. The protection may feel like a moat. In practice, it's closer to an anaesthetic. So governments can't hear us because they're too well insulated. That's what they call the Canberra bubble.
Yep.
Now, the nowhere else to go bit might be changing. Reference One Nation and the stories we've had with those just recently.
Yep. And we'll see where Gerard ends up as well, because he's obviously making a lot of noise as well.
Yeah. And Tommy Robinson.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, interesting to see Liam Bartlett try and hammer Tommy Robinson on the street in an interview. He's giving what for?
I didn't even watch it. I assumed it would be deceptively edited and pushing an agenda and all that. So yeah, I've heard Tommy speak himself, so I know where I sit with that, and I know what he sacrificed.
Yep.
Alrighty, so hang on, where's the click over button? Okay, so
Miscellaneous.
We're getting there. So this is in addition to the where does that saying come from files. So this story was about a triple amputee from one of the recent Gulf Wars. And I might just pause there because the triple amputee became a thing in the Iraq War onwards. And a triple amputee was someone who'd lost both legs and one arm. And there was a specific mechanism for that. And we saw quite a few of these in those theatres. So if you're an infantry soldier patrolling around and you're wearing body armour, your core is relatively protected. Now, if you are right-handed, your right hand will be in against your body holding the trigger and your left hand will be out along the barrel of the gun. So if you stand on an IED, or IED is just a mine, you'll lose at least part of both your legs and you'll lose half the arm that's sticking out. The only arm you keep is your dominant hand because it's clutched in close to your body. In most previous wars, that would be a lethal injury, but we saw plenty of survivors in Iraq and Afghanistan because they were core protected. They had body armour for the trunk, and they had a pretty rapid and pretty good medical service that could rescue people from these. So when I look at this, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this guy was left-handed. So the story there was he was in trouble for something to do with the border wall. But the reason I bring it up is because that brings to mind the term basket case. We've heard the Victorian economy is a basket case, for example. And my memory is that it actually related to Civil War and World War I quadruple amps, where you lost all your limbs, and so all they could do is cart you around in a basket. That's the sort of mythology around it. Now, Kel Richards on the ABC watches the show, and I'm going to show you what he had to say about that.
As he does every Wednesday, wordsmith and broadcaster extraordinaire, Kel Richards. Well, Kel, we've got some good ones for us tonight. Daryl, a viewer Daryl, wants to know the source of the expression basket case. He says he's heard it referred to in relation to the Victorian economy. He's not wrong. It's a basket case in Victoria. Where's the word come from? Where's the phrase come from?
Oh, it's an interesting one. From America from 1918. And there was a story that soldiers who were injured in the trenches in the First World War and lost all 4 limbs were put in a basket instead of on a stretcher. Now, it almost certainly was never true. So the Oxford Dictionary comments any soldier who lost all 4 limbs and needed quadruple amputation wouldn't have survived the original injuries, let alone the surgery. So it was never true. But the rumour was so widespread it gave birth to this expression, which is a horrible expression when you understand it, basket case.
I thought it might have had routine and the head falling off and falling into a basket, but that, I have to say, that's even worse. Hey, another one, and my mother.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
And I said there, look, medical care has come a long way. And as an example, during the First World War, a fractured femur had an 80% mortality rate in the trenches. Now, a fractured femur, which is the thigh bone, is a serious injury, but you would be asking what happened if somebody died of that today. Terrible conditions in the trenches, long transport times, cold, wet, mud, etc. You had a 4 out of 5 chance of dying of a fractured femur in the trenches in World War I. Nowadays, you'd almost certainly survive it.
Horrible situation that people created that, certain people that wanted power, that, use people as cannon fodder, the average person as cannon fodder, Bruce. Terrible stuff. But, you're an anaesthetist during those times. What do you say about some of the surgeons that had to deal with that and save people with having, that story of that person you just had? You said you had instances like that, both legs and arms gone. They would have been some pretty special character, some of the surgeons you would have been working with over there in your time. Yeah,
well, surgeons are psychopaths, so it doesn't apply to surgeons, of course, but non-surgical doctors. Look, on a serious note, I knew better people than me who got really badly beaten up by things that they didn't saw overseas, in East Timor, in Afghanistan, Iraq. They got serious PTSD, and they were well-established trauma docs like I was. I don't know how I slipped through that. That didn't seem to happen to me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it helps if you just look at it as what you got in front of you, doing the best you can, and ultimately that's what you always strive to do. I guess just getting to know you over the last 4 or so years, it's just do the best you can and then sleep well, because you know that you've did everything that you could and you weren't responsible for what you're seeing in front of you. But yeah, terrible stuff, mate. I don't know if I'd have handled it. I'm probably a different person. I'm kind of
Yeah, it's not for everybody. I'll give you that.
Yep, terrible stuff.
Jumping on a fire truck and driving towards the flames isn't for everybody either.
No, this is right. Exactly right.
All right. So to finish out, the Uslam bird of ridiculosity. And I put this in because this is a beautiful example of Abraham Lincoln's saying. And Abraham Lincoln is reputed to have said the best way to get a bad law repealed is to enforce it strictly. Variously attributed, but Lincoln was one of them. And as an example of that, and I take my hat off here, and it reminds me of me, calling out in those welcome to countries and saying, well, that's not very inclusive, is it? This story from Canada involving a rainbow-coloured squad car and a couple of Canadian citizens just asking some questions of the coppers. So,
what have you got for us here, Brucey? What have you found?
I was contacted by the Crown at the Ontario Court of Justice to assist with the case that they had. So they asked me to reach out to the victim and make sure she's safe and take her home.
He drove me home in the fabulous Pride SUV. And as he was driving me home, we reached a stoplight, and then an individual in a pickup truck came up to us.
A transgender cop car. Look at that. Are you guys cops, or you just identify as cops? That's none of your business, and I'm hands-free. So there's nothing you can do. I'm just asking you a question. Sergeant, you cops, or you identify as cops? I have no idea. That reality doesn't exist anymore, right?
Part of me was shocked, but part of me was not shocked. I am a trans woman. I've been transitioning for 8 years. I get harassed and vilified every day of my life.
The chief spoke recently. We had an event. Hate crimes towards the 2S LGBT community are up 140% between January and May. So it's certainly a worrying trend. Not only do I think violent rhetoric can become violent actions, it does. That's where it starts. And I think a lot of that is bred by things like this. I do many different things. I try not to ever say no whenever I'm needed. A lot of things that we do too are visibility, showing the 2S LGBTQ plus community who we are.
I think it's fantastic that Toronto Police Service has created a response to the need. I think their visibility is important in a world that right now is working so hard to erase who LGBTQI people are. Have a happy and safe Pride, everyone.
Okay, yeah, well, the corporation in full swing. Yeah, and maybe there wouldn't be any hostility if they weren't trying to push themselves into female changing places, toilets, sports, and every other part of biological female spaces. Asked Sal Grover how she feels about having to give up her business and up because of that. Yeah. Anyway, Toronto Police, yep, good on you.
I particularly liked the approach of the citizens. Are you police officers or just identifying as police officers? Isn't that brilliant?
Well, it was just a question. There was nothing violent about that, was there? Like they were talking about, violence towards, but that's what it is now. Is this speech? Asking questions can be classed as violent hate, Bruce. Violent hate.
And that's the point. You're not allowed to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. No. That's right.
To determine who rules over you, first determine who you may not criticise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. So many instances of that, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. Can you bring me back up? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so, and with that approach, are you cops or just identifying as cops? That is straight out of Saul Alinsky's playbook. Saul Alinsky was a left-wing agitator who wrote this book, Rules for Radicals. And one of his rules was this: make your enemy live up to its own book of rules.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them, are you just identifying or are you real? Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, if your police car's not painted in proper police colours and it's painted in a rainbow and something else, it's a good question to ask, isn't it? Are you identifying as police or not?
Interrupt during one of those racist welcome to countries and say, that's not very inclusive, is it?
No. Well, fair enough too.
They're rules.
That's right.
They're rules. All right, and to finish, was it Jace that I gave the gazump strike to earlier?
It might have been. Jace's.
Question for you, Jace. Why don't we pronounce the meow in homeowner?
Homeo. It's a good question. That's such a ridiculous thing to ask. There you go. That's random. Homeo.
I'm done,
there
mate.
you go.
I'm done.
You're done.
Right.
Look at you. Look at you go. Well, there you go. We're finishing up a little bit earlier this week, and compared to others, that's good. You got me now. I'm trying to pronounce it. Homeo owner, and you got an empty glass of empty musket. There's no musket in there. Yeah.
Cut the chit chat. Get the outro.
Get the outro. Brucey wants to sit in front of the fire with probably a good book, big fat book, and have another musket and enjoy the warmth, the radiating warmth of a beautiful fire there in country Victoria. What do you reckon?
I'm into it. Roll tape.
That's it. Roll tape. All right. God bless you, everybody, and I hope you have a great evening. See you all next week. Thanks again to everybody that keeps commenting and showing up and joining us to make the show great. All right. Take care, everybody.
So the signs were there for all to see, the signs that we lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains, we turn our hearts away. Like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem from a braver day, a song our children need to hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix. Too scared to sing the anthem from a braver day, a song our children still need to hear, the ballad of Dr.